one thing we did last year, and I think it's worth going through because we've been undertaking visitor surveys, well, certainly since I've been around, which is about 11 years now on the trot, using a couple of companies over that time, 3 in fact. But the last few years have been very much the Southwest Research Company. Last year's was slightly different as we had to do it online. We normally do a combination of online and street surveys so that we can judge whether the online is different to in the street. Obviously, with COVID over the last year, it was actually all done online, but we did have a very good response, and some of the other indicators indicate that obviously it's there. It's a robust sample. So the visitor profile last year, starting on this one, is, we always find this actually, it tends to be the female that will respond to surveys. But what you will see from the survey is more importantly about your age. That is about our normal profile for the whole year. So, so that's where it sort of matches up in comparisons with others. Obviously, some people are either too secretive or maybe too old to want to declare their age. But that's the sort of normal profile we get in terms of responses. I think it's probably slightly out of skew with the profile of visitors, probably a few younger ones, but they're too busy enjoying life to respond. But it's a good sample, and it was, I think over about 3,000 respondents. When it comes to the, I'm just going to have to reduce you down a bit, sorry, because I can't see the, sorry, page up. I have to go back in one. Sorry, I'm trying to, I've got lots of people and I can't see what the slide says. When it comes to the social economic side, an increase actually normally in slight increase in the C1s. So we did have a sort of bit of a mix there, probably coming around from the staycation and those not going abroad. And the distribution of where people came from, obviously there were a few in Cornwall. You'll see that it's actually quite interesting. We had quite a lot from Glasgow. The ones slightly out, still small numbers, but I think they would probably normally fly abroad. But you'll see that's a sort of normal distribution. Few more from around the Manchester, Sheffield area than we normally expect, which is good. But is that normally the bulk is around the Midlands and South, and that's where our customers tend to come from. So a normal distribution, and you can see the effect of the motorways really with people coming down. Again, bearing in mind this was through the whole of 2021 when we were operating, so main season as well as peak weeks as well as non-peak weeks. You'll see that actually a large part is couples and partners, and then immediate family. But the extended family is the interesting one to us. 70% of the extended family. When I'm talking later, I think there is a real opportunity in that area of multi-gens and a mixture of family and friends and groups. And you'll see 4% were on their own. And I won't say what I once said on a TV program, that there aren't many Billy and Jilly no-mates who go on holiday on their own. So I then spent an hour on the phone in at lunchtime defending that I wasn't being rude. So there are people who travel on their own, but it's a small part. And you'll see that the coach, but that's probably the nature of our database in terms of contacting people and the other databases we used. The characteristics of the visit. I'm just going to have to move something a minute out of the way because that's better. You'll see that actually 49% have been in the last 12 months. So that's probably, well, normally we would expect to see that at 40, top 30s to 45% max. So that is up. And I think that actually says that in the 2 years, 2020 and 2021, we were in a position where a lot more people came to Cornwall 2 years in a row. And then you'll see the one in the last 1 to 2 years and the 12% then 2 to 5. The 2 to 5 would normally be about 40%. So you'll see that we had a lot of people returning, and in a normal year, we would normally expect around 40, well, about top 30s to 45% to be the people who come every year, but the same amount of people who come every 2 to 5 years, and the 10 to 15% new. So we've had an awful lot of that second group that have come to Cornwall for 2 years in a row. That's because they like it. They don't come here, they don't come as frequently as those who love it every year because they like it, but they tend to go other places. So my first little note of take in mind of if you've got customers that have come 2 years in a row and now they can go abroad, we might have some challenges this year. But equally, we had a load of people who couldn't get into Cornwall last year who might also replace some of those who choose to give Cornwall a drop for a couple of years. Because we have picked up that there has been some nuance of certain segments saying, love Cornwall, getting a bit bored, want to go somewhere else. We've been there the last 2 or 3 years. That's not our loyal, regular ones. It is that 40-45% who come every 2 to 5 years. So no surprises here on where they're staying. Self-catering is still very dominant, and often self-catering is mixed with service, particularly hotels and places with their own complexes. Static caravan strong, camping stronger than normal, no surprise there. And you'll see that that's a sort of profile we'd normally expect, which gives us some confidence in the replies as well. Interesting, there is main holiday. That's roughly, slightly up on it. Secondary holidays and short breaks. So we're still very much a main holiday destination. And the secondary holidays, that's the bulk of it, as well as short breaks. So again, very, very similar data and very rewarding that way. What were their views of Cornwall? Most important thing. And what we have asked in this survey was what's the difference between those that have been to Cornwall for the first time versus those that come more regularly, either every year or every 2 to 5 years. And I'll bring that up later. So the first thing shown in these slides, because I can show you lots of them, is where we're servicing well is where it's out towards 5. 5 is the highest score. So quality of service and accommodation up there. Overall enjoyment of the visit. That's basically, you're talking about 96% score in my way of looking at it. And again, 90% feeling of welcome and general atmosphere. So for all my trolls who were going on about hating visitors and hating Emmets, they were either very quiet when they're around them or actually didn't actually meet many. So we're very, very good on the overall quality of the visit, welcome, general atmosphere. We're also very good on places to visit and attractions. So now we've got some attractions on the call. And anything really 4+ we should be quite proud of. So places to eat and drink, shopping, don't know where they went. The beaches and the beach quality is very, very strong. So those are all the positives. So they like what they had. They enjoyed what they did. They enjoyed the range of stuff we had. However, you will see there's a dip every time on value for money. I think this is a lesson again for 2022. Is value for money. Yes, people often, there's always a dip on the value for money score, slightly more than it would normally be, but we are facing a cost of living crisis. So people will be looking to, when they spend their money, to actually feel that they've spent it wisely. And in 2021, there was still a build-up of people wanting a holiday with money to spend. So my flagging there is really start thinking about how you get that value for money across and get those there. Where we're on the downside is ease of parking, value for money parking, public transport, difficult issues, and some areas, but it's mainly around that parking area. So the lesson from this slide is we delivered, but people were getting sensitive to the value for money point. And now this sort of springs just this little slide that says the difference between the day visitors, the staying visitors, and the 8% or so that were actually residents, which were factored out in some. And you'll see a remarkable similarity between what day visitors feel as staying visitors, as well as residents. And obviously a lot of day visitors are just over the border. So you'll see there, they're all very happy. Us locals are even grumpier about parking and probably grumpier about shopping. So, we are delivering not just for staying visitors, for everybody there. And this one is first-time visitors versus repeat visitors. So I did say we'd flag this up. And again, a remarkable similarity between the charts. First-time visitors, again, they actually felt the feeling was better. They probably might have had an issue there. Slightly more critical on some issues, but within the range of statistical and issues. But it's interesting to me that the one that came out was the attractions, where it peaked slightly more, and they weren't so bothered about parking. Well, it's probably because a lot of them come from cities and other areas, but remarkable similarity between first-time visitors and others. But again, prices again, not quite so dramatic as the other one. And then for those who replaced a trip abroad, again, look at that, remarkable similarity. Obviously only shopping out. So, I keep saying it, Cornwall delivered. Last year we delivered for the visitor, whether they were a first-time visitor or somebody who'd actually chosen Cornwall. Might not have been a first-time visitor, but they actually chose, they didn't have much choice but to come. And the people who did replace a trip abroad were mainly, it would have been European, but they were all around the world where they would have gone. So again, just going through a few things here, just to flag up. You can look at this, and other people would take good and very good and all together, but you'll see very, very strong. But again, you got this pushback on value for money. It's very good and good, but then you got the average bit creeping up. So again, value for money being a real issue. And again, shopping, again, value for money starting to be picked up. But again, the quality of service and the range, we are delivering there. Maybe it's not as strong. We're not going to be selling ourselves as a shopping destination, but it is part of a holiday experience. And places to eat and drink, the range is very, very strong. The quality of service, we are delivering, or rather you guys are delivering, but again, value for money. And as I said, I wouldn't worry so much about this if we weren't entering into a period where the cost of living is going to become a very, very big issue going forward. And people want to feel that I think people will be willing to spend their money, but they're probably going to make sure that they're getting the quality and getting it right. So my overriding thing on value for money, when this has happened in the past, and I've got grey hair, so I do remember, is often the top end can hold the customer, have to still work on it and really wow them so that the value for money comes in. And the bottom tends to be in the middle, where it's sort of okay and not quite nice, but then people maybe know they can go and pick something up at Marks and Spencer's, or comparing it with Waitrose, particularly on food. And places for attractions, great to see this because they are there, certainly for Cater members and all others, it is delivering value for money again. But as I said, that's the issue going forward this year. Will people go to less attractions? What will they do? And I'll speculate a bit of that at the end. How do you rate the beaches? Well, look at that. Quality of our beaches is very good to good. I mean, you're talking about 97% and 95% on cleanliness, bearing in mind how busy we were this year. So we are delivering. This is no excuse for Cornwall Council and districts and local councils and beach owners not to clean, but please keep it up and even strive a bit harder, because they are our greatest asset. People just want to be there. Obviously, this is where it's around finding your way around, signs, map boards, but we are in a digital era, so we have got to look at that. There's something we'll be covering tomorrow. And public transport, there is a push to use more public transport, but you'll see there that people are reasonable, but we're not there, and it's quite difficult. Hopefully the one Cornwall transport network, when it gets going, which will integrate train times to buses and a far more integrated approach, becoming in the next year, and the fact that the price of public transport might be dropping dramatically for a year, because I know that's in the plans of Cornwall Council as a pilot for the country to say, if you reduce the price, will more people use it? Could well actually help us there. And this is the one I think sort of covered, but it's worth reiterating why I drag this one up, is the general atmosphere. Again, 97% can add up quickly. Feeling a welcome, regardless of all the grumps, 92%. And overall enjoyment of the visit. Look at that, 83% very good and good. You know, it's those very goods that you've got to be pleased with, but value for money again. You know, overall it was 70%. Those other ones were higher. So you can see that people are twitchy, but we did deliver, and we did deliver value for money. And I'm sure lots of people, if you're in any other business, you'd be pleased with those results, not results. Now, this is the one, just take a few minutes on. How did it live up to expected? Two worse than expected. Much better, 15% better than expected, bearing in mind those high percentages of people who've been to Cornwall before. So these are people who know it, which is hardly surprising we got it there. So you'll see the day visitors and the residents. Obviously, they were happy. First-time visitors, worse than expected. You've seen a slight nuance there, as expected. But look at the difference there, better than expected compared with those that know it, and much better than expected. So that means we really did deliver for those first-time visitors. So, you know, again, not only Cornwall delivered, it delivered well. I think people's expectations were delivered. Maybe they factored in it was going to be busy. Maybe some of their expectations were diminished by the media going on and on and on about how crowded Cornwall was going to be. But we're there. And again, repeat customers, very, very good. Replaced a trip abroad. This is where you see, again, you know, again, good results, 37% better than expected, not so high as much better. So we did deliver, even for those where they replaced a trip abroad and for those that are first-time visitors. So overall, we should be very pleased with what Cornwall delivered, and it does bode well for the future in these very interesting times that we live in. Again, look at this one. This is the one about the recommendation score, which is how many people would promote you, how many people were negative, and how many roughly were there. So you'll see there that, you know, looking at those first-time visitors again, yeah, the recommendation score, you know, is lower than for our residents and staying visitors and day visitors. So, but it's still a good score. You know, there's still 70% or 69% promoters. And the same with when you see the repeat one. So we've got, you know, they enjoyed it, but the value for money issues, they liked it, but whether they'll go around promoting Cornwall is a different issue. But again, quite strong for those that replaced a trip abroad as a promoter score. So we're not discontent with those, but obviously there are people who like to go to the same places on holiday and get really into them, and those that like to go to different places, and you do understand that. So, so what was the impact on people and the numbers? Well, the first thing is surprise, surprise, surprise. People did notice that they'd increased a bit, particularly the staying visitors. A few thought it was the same, probably if you're in a resort like Newquay and some other ones that are busier. I don't know where people thought it was decreased, but maybe I won't do my Camborne joke. And unsure. So people had noticed. Obviously, if you're down on the Roseland and Liz and some other areas, it didn't actually feel as rammed as it did on one of the more popular ones of St Ives, down around the famous, or in our case, almost infamous beaches where people crowd. We've got over 300 beaches. People do like to go to two particular ones. And did it have an impact? Yes, it did have a negative impact. So they did notice it. But going back to those other schools, you did notice that they actually still recommended us, even though, so people factored it in. They did factor it in, even our dear residents. I think overall they factored in that it's just going to be a busy year when so many people couldn't travel abroad. And how much would that affect your plans? The big in our case, $2 billion question. Minor impact, wouldn't change your visit. For those with immediate impact, it did change their plans, change your plans, you know, your visit plans. And a negative caused severe disruption. So there was 1 in 8 that really got affected by that issue. More importantly, what would you do about it? 55% still continue to come. We'll try and change of year. So there's a real opportunity, maybe weekend breaks, shoulder season, even winter. And another one about to attract people to the areas that are least visited or well-known, Southeast Cornwall, some of the other areas around Bodmin Moor. And 6% said they would not consider, so they would consider whether they came back or not. So again, quite positive results really overall, considering how very busy it was. And having looked at some figures last week from Francis Clark on hotels, we were incredibly busy. 2020 was probably just over a normal summer, probably just about bouncing along. Last year was probably 15-20% up for those main peak weeks. A lot of that due to camping and 56-day licenses, and lots of Airbnb and other platforms are available. And holidays abroad, how did we stack up? Did your trip replace a holiday that would normally have been taken abroad? 2070s, yeah. So yes, it did. And 20% of those consider other destinations. So again, whether it replaced or to be taken abroad, obviously repeat visitors a lot less, first-time visitors quite a lot. But that's the issue, and whether you consider visiting any other destinations. So we were the destination of choice last year. Lots of people who couldn't get into Cornwall had to suffer from going to Devon, which is actually quite a nice place. Don't let Devon know I said that. And again, this shows this spread I referred to earlier on of where people went, and you'll see that, you know, it's mainly Europe, but look at the Canadas, look at the others. This is the more affluent customer base that comes to Cornwall. When you look at that range, yes, you have got Spain, but you've got quite a lot of other places as well when you start looking at those. And overall, compared with overseas, you'll see there where it says better than overseas, as good as overseas. Just taking those, you're talking about 68% and not as good. And shopping, you have to, you know, eating out. So, you know, people were a bit grumpy about just places to visit, and beaches. We did reasonably well on general atmosphere, but you can see that those that wanted to go abroad, you know, they are lovers of going abroad. The real worrying one to me as we go into this is value for money. You know, as good as abroad, not as good as over abroad, better than overseas. So they were probably camping. And do you plan to go abroad? This is the other £2 billion question. And the answer is, okay, when this was done during the year, mainly in the autumns, obviously, they didn't know if they could go abroad this year. So let's take out the 43%. And basically look at that, it's a large chunk of people. People will be returning to their overseas patterns. Only 10% of those who go abroad won't. And how likely are you to come to Cornwall again? Question is when? 85%. And if you add on the likely, it's 94%. So again, summing up, Cornwall delivered. But when we delivered, we satisfied, we pleased, but people will want to return to their old habits. So summing up, with 5 minutes to go, not enough time for questions, Charlotte will tell me off, is Cornwall delivered, but bearing in mind those key statistics I said at the beginning, late top 30 to 45% of visitors come every year, depending on exchange rates and weather and economy. The same amount come every 2 to 5 years, and then we've got new visitors. My concern this year is a lot of those who come every 2 to 5 years are also people who go abroad in between. My other query is, what will happen with cost of living? Will that benefit short breaks over longer breaks? Will it benefit with the cost of petrol, places closer to markets? But people will be looking to have comfort that they're spending their money wisely.